Well, thank you. I'm confident that they lie before us as well, and I know Senator Scott is confident of that. And so as we think about assessing the national strategy, the Tourism and Travel Advisory Board, you did provide key recommendations to the Department of Commerce during the development of the National Tourism and Travel Strategy that we've just been discussing with Assistant Secretary of Commerce Harris. And we've also been talking about how it might be implemented. So before I get into specific questions about particular aspects of the strategy and how it can revive our tourism economy, I'd really like to hear from both of you representing the nation's key private sector tourism stakeholders on the advisory boards you oversee about your assessment of the department's plan. So, Mr. Hornbuckle, what is your overall assessment of the strategy they put forth? What do you feel are its key strengths? And where do you think it falls short? What else do we need to include or think about here in Congress? And then, of course, we'll follow up with Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Senator Rosen, for the question. Let me just echo my thanks to my colleague and ultimately to Secretary Raimondo and Assistant Secretary Harris. The collaboration on this has been extensive. It's been thoughtful. It is taken on through TTAB and others, a great deal of stakeholder input. And so they are to be thanked for that. Look, generally and overall, the strategy is bold. When you talk about 90 million visitors by 2027, that'll be upon us quickly. When you think that they took it seriously, and I think ultimately this committee and the administration has taken tourism and travel seriously, obviously 1 in 20 jobs in the United States depend on it. And the investment has been there. Your support of Brand USA and the $250 million will go a long way in reigniting what has been a great tourism story over the last several decades. A couple of things maybe to point to or point out, focusing on making travel to and in and out of the United States, but once you get in, is critical. I think you heard it throughout the Assistant Secretary's comments, my comments, Mr. Dean's comments. Making an easier pathway is essential. You also heard me talk about investment in infrastructure. There's $1.2 trillion sitting there, making sure that in the instance I gave, whether it's our I-15 or airports, I recently had the opportunity to go through Amsterdam Airport, and the technology that's deployed there to get people through that with ease is amazing and critical. So I would not necessarily critique it in the context of what's not there. I think it'll be about what gets done. I think it's an encompassing plan. I think it's a well thought through plan. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure it's got the resource, the focus, and the necessary dedication it needs to implement it. Because I think that becomes the trickier part, given scale and scope. These are not small goals, and it will take a great deal of focus. So with that, Madam Chair, I turn the questions back to you.
Your thoughts on the strategy?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is a bold, ambitious strategy, and I'm reminded of my grandfather, who was not a learned man, but maybe one of the wisest people I ever met, who often reminded me that you always have time for those things which you place first. And so to me, the real question is, where do we go in terms of action steps and items, especially in light of the questions earlier in this hearing about the collaboration that's required between state, federal governments, and the private sector partners. I think it's absolutely critical that we build upon the success that Brand USA has already created. The interest is there, and we're already seeing that with an amazing body of research that tells us that international travelers are ready and eager to return to the United States. And in fact, even in Puerto Rico, in the first quarter of 2022, we welcomed more than twice as many international visitors as we did a year ago. So that recovery is already underway, but the visa time processing is going to be a major impediment going forward. And I think it's important that we considered where we were with the 2012 national strategy, which reflected the same concern at that time, and we saw a lot of progress thereafter. I think it's absolutely important that we focus on those countries where the greatest lag and short-term potential exists. I believe 3 out of 4 potential visa processing opportunities lie within 3 countries, Mexico, Brazil, and India, so we should certainly start there. I think also in terms of the quick, necessary actions to accelerate the recovery, it's going to be absolutely imperative that we look to the second-tier and third-tier cities, not just the top-tier cities. It's one of the great benefits of Brand USA is they really level the playing field and allow all of us to participate. So I think their plan going forward to promote and expand travel and tourism, especially with their current innovative effort of the United Stories, telling those amazing stories throughout the United States. And I think that's particularly relevant as we think about approaching a very important and historic milestone, the 250th anniversary of this great nation. What an extraordinary opportunity. All communities, large, small, metro, rural, both in the 50 United States as well as the other jurisdictions of the U.S., to be able to amplify that message and share with the world what great stories we have, the beautiful places and the beautiful faces that we offered to make extraordinary travel experiences. So for me, the plan is solid. Now we have to take the next steps to put this plan into action to ensure that we return our travel and tourism industry to the robust, economic, vibrant machine it was before.
Well, thank you. I share your enthusiasm for that, and I do think your grandfather was a very wise man. Those are wise words. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Scott for a round of questioning.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Rosen. Puerto Rico is a standout destination for tourism in the Caribbean and is a shining example of economic recovery from not only the pandemic, as you talked about, but also from 2 large hurricanes. So why don't you talk about what you did and what were the contributing factors?
Thank you, Ranking Member Scott. I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge the support we received from Visit Florida. I believe at the time you were governor, but Visit Florida, the state of Nevada, the state of California, Texas, South Carolina, a number of others were actively involved in helping us create this new public-private partnership. And that was particularly important because after decades of tourism promotion that had been inconsistent, largely due to the frequent changes in leadership in the Puerto Rico government, we finally now have a private sector-led public-private partnership that is delivering record results. And I think that was certainly an important step. But I must admit, I think the real strength and certainty of the recovery in Puerto Rico is the spirit of strength and resiliency within the people of Puerto Rico. And when you consider what they faced over the last 6 to 7 years, the Zika virus, Hurricanes Irma and Maria, earthquakes, not to mention, financial challenges, and then a global pandemic, their sense of unity transcends governmental, political, and socioeconomic barriers, and that's certainly been the foundation for the recovery. I also think that the Beatles said it best. We get by with a little help from our friends. We've had extraordinary support from the federal government, which continues on through this day. We've had partners not only at the state tourism levels, but at Brand USA, which dedicated a lot of time and resources to that. And I have to acknowledge one of the most successful programs that helped fuel that recovery was a community development block grant, the CDBG Disaster Recovery Funds, that HUD authorized. The final estimate of the return on investment for the federal government after it was all said and done was $106 of direct economic impact for every federal dollar invested, a great ROI, not only for the island of Puerto Rico and for the federal government. So I think it really comes down to the character and resiliency of the people of Puerto Rico, the innovative model that we've been able to apply, which promotes the rich, vibrant culture of the island, and then the partnerships both in the private and public sector, which has allowed us to set a record pace for recovery in travel and tourism.
So in Florida, I think 1 out of every about 6 jobs is tied to tourism. What's it like in Puerto Rico, and how important is tourism to the workforce in Puerto Rico and basically the base of taxes for the state or island government?
When you consider, pre-pandemic, a $9 billion economic engine that employs 86,000 people and generates over $760 million of taxes to an island that admittedly has faced its fair share and then some of financial difficulties, I don't think we can even begin to properly state, at least I can't, the true value of travel and tourism. But I think oftentimes, Senator, we in the industry perhaps do ourselves a bit of a disservice by always pointing to the numbers. Jobs and taxes and revenues are important. But I think travel and tourism is far more effective and impactful in Puerto Rico, and I would say the same for my peers and communities throughout the 50 states. When you think about travel and tourism, it's not simply a generator of economic activity, but oftentimes the first date for relocation and commercial investment, Before people invest in your community and create jobs, they experience your hotels, your restaurants, your taxi cabs. And we've seen, even by using the Longwoods Halo study to measure the impact of travel and tourism advertising, how much more likely people are to think favorably about your community, or in this case, your island, through travel and tourism marketing. It reminds us of the sheer importance of this industry. It's not lost upon me, and I'm sure not upon you or any member of this subcommittee, that there is no other industry in the United States of America that on any given day employs more people, speaks to more people, and serves more people than the travel and tourism industry. So when you consider that, the importance of travel and tourism in Puerto Rico is far beyond my ability to describe in words.
So in Florida, what you just talked about was absolutely true. Generally no one moves to Florida before they come as a tourist first, and then they move possibly themselves or a business. So we sold a lot of homes that way. Has that happened in Puerto Rico?
It certainly does, and we've seen that not only in the metropolitan area, but in some of the outlying areas. In fact, like your states of Florida and Nevada, and I'm sure others represented on this subcommittee, oftentimes that demand for housing that starts with a visitor who's now relocating or investing, maybe a second home or rental property, often competes with the housing needed for local residents, which I think underscores the importance of affordable housing strategies in all that we do. But we have definitely seen, both before and after the pandemic, the impact that travel and tourism has on the real estate and development industry. And I don't expect that to slow down anytime soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.